This is GARIS, Masculist, MGTOW flyers. That is 2 3-page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW. Written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de GARIS. This is flyer number 5-6, entitled MGTOW/Masculist Strategies Towards the Journalists. Description. This flyer talks about strategies that MGTOW/Masculists can use to approach the journalists to motivate them to write/film pieces about MGTOW/Masculist ideas to spread the word to the hundreds of millions. Flyer itself. MGTOW/Masculist strategies towards the journalists. I suppose the above title should be more correctly limited to masculist strategies, since the MGTOWs are self-avowedly politically impotent. This political impotence of the MGTOWs has always been a source of my contempt for their lack of political activism, but I can't push this line of thought too far, because at least MGTOWs are making YouTube videos and getting the word out, which I, as a politically minded masculist, cannot do much more than, given that the journalists have yet to catch on to the main ideas of MGTOW/Masculism in a big way. But, judging by the growth of MGTOW/Masculism, the journalists are now beginning to take notice, due to, for example, the herbivore men phenomenon in Japan. That is, a third, maybe now 2/3, of young Japanese men refuse to date women or have sex with them. This is such a high proportion that the Japanese gender politicians are now pulling their hair out and have even appointed a minister of population to try to persuade young men to reproduce more, because the Japanese population is falling and will crash badly if the trend continues. In the West, the BBC has started taking an interest, so others will follow. So what strategy should the MGTOW/Masculists take regarding journalists? This topic is of real concern to me personally, since I'm currently actively trying to get the journalists interested. In the early 80s, I did this with considerable success, getting on the media several hundred times in Belgium, Holland, France, Germany and the UK, pushing masculist ideas. The journalists then were mostly males who were bored with a decade of feminism in the 70s, so to hear an angry masculist talk about female financial parasitism and that all women should be FIPs, financially independent persons, was refreshing to them, so they wrote about it and invited me on lots of interviews. Since I could speak French, German and Dutch, as well as my native English, I had a wide audience. I'm wondering if I will have the same effect 3 decades later, now that I've taken up the torch again for men's lib. In the late 80s, I lost interest in masculism because I thought the main masculist problem had been solved, that is, that women should become FIPs. In the 80s, there was such a massive influx of women into the professions that I felt the wind had gone out of my sails, so I concentrated on my career, got a PhD and focused on building artificial brains and warning the world of the threat of the rise of massively intelligent machines, that I'm still doing. See my website. I'm now actively approaching the journalists in a systematic way. So to do so, I had to sit down and think, what's a good, effective approach to take with the journalists? After a bit of thought, I came up with the following recipe. A. Email out a press release that explains the main ideas of MGTOW/Masculism. B. Email the male journalists. Actually, I also send it to some female journalists too, in case some of them write a negative piece on the ideas. I take the view that any publicity is good publicity, since putting the label, the concept of MGTOW and masculist into the minds of people will get them curious, so they'll be more motivated to Google the terms and begin their education process. C. Build up a library of material that the journalists can read to educate themselves. This I have done with over 50 flyers, now about 200. 2-page essays on a given topic, rather like an op-ed in a newspaper or magazine. I also give the pseudonyms of the major MGTOWs, such as Sandman, Thinking Ape, Dark Knight, etc. Although I think he died. Not literally died, just disappeared. So those journalists who prefer to watch rather than read can get educated as well by watching YouTube videos. I'm getting about half a dozen hits a day to to the link of the file containing links to the 50-odd MGTOW/Masculist flyers that are stored at wordpress.com. In fact, here is that link. profhugo-de-garis.wordpress.com/MGTOW-masculist-resource-flyers/. And here's the link to the press release. profhugo-de-garis.wordpress.com/MGTOW-masculist-press-release. My next major decision was what theme to emphasize in the press release. Journalists are busy people and receive tons of garbage each day that they usually dismiss in a few seconds each, so you have to catch their attention. So I chose the following introduction. With the young generation reproducing only a third of its number, this male refusal will wipe out the US population within a century, making it the most alarming phenomenon of our era, and hopefully will attract your attention as a male journalist, because as a male you are personally concerned. We hope you will report on this issue. One of the main reasons why I'm now devoting a few hours a day to masculism again is that I consider the population crash as the top priority issue that humanity has to deal with. Nothing is more important to human beings than the survival of human beings. But MGTOW/masculism threatens to wipe out humanity. This problem is so important that it is inevitable that the media and the gender politicians will sooner or later wake up to the issue and report on it, or start thinking about it, making more men-fair gender laws. I'm hoping that theme will cause the journalists to sit up and take notice, and then start writing about the issue. Another theme I put in the press release was why young men are rejecting marriage and paternity, that is, by emphasizing that about one married father in 4 in the US will be financially massacred in the fluffy feminist-dominated divorce courts, making marriage toxic for men. So of course young men reject it and refuse to have kids. This rejection will not change until the gender politicians make the gender laws men fair. I emphasized the man strike because the odds are high that sooner or later one of these male journalists will take a personal interest in MGTOW/masculist ideas, because he too has been dragged through a fluffy feminist-dominated divorce court and has been financially massacred. Such journalists are worth their weight in gold because they get fired up, become strongly committed to use their power and skills to get the word out and reach the minds of millions. I had this happen to me several times in the 80s. One young journalist of one of the most popular weekly magazines in Belgium had been badly hurt by his former feminist wife, but lacked the intellectual tools to express his male anger. Once he came across masculist ideas, he felt empowered and wrote a long cover story piece that really launched my masculist campaign in Belgium, which then spread into Holland. And then the French-speaking journalists who could read Flemish, Dutch, got interested, and then in time the French got involved, and man, did they get involved. I consider the French to be the most intellectualized culture on the planet. They have a saying, "En France, les intellectuels sont les dieux." In France, the intellectuals are gods. They really ran with it, including top newspapers like Le Monde. So I'm hoping something similar might happen this time round, 3 decades later, but in a very different environment. For a start, a much higher proportion of journalists are now women, but not at the top level, fortunately for me. Once again, the phenomenon of GMV, greater male variance, plays its part. The greater male variance of journalistic ability means that in the top newspapers such as the New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, etc., are male dominated. I notice this when I compile lists of names and their emails of the columnists of these top US newspapers. Most of them are male and in their 50s and 60s at the top of their careers, so I hope some of them have been financially massacred in the divorce courts and so be primed to take up the MGTOW/masculist ideas and spread the word to the millions instead of a piddly few tens of thousands the way YouTube videos do. It's too soon to say whether my strategies will work or not. If they don't, then I will try something else and dream up some alternative strategies. I doubt I will have to, because the inevitability of the crash of the population, when a third of the young men in the US refuse to marry and have kids, will get the attention of the media and gender politicians sooner or later. My feeling is that things will take off in 2016. fingers crossed. Remember, I wrote this 1 or 2 years ago. Things are taking off, but ironically, due to women. The best film on these issues, men's lib issues, was actually made by a woman. The film was called The Red Pill, and it's causing quite a stir. Good. Yeah, whatever works, male or female, as long as the message gets out. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. YouTube channel name, De Garis, Masculist, MGTOW, Flyers. Ciao.